Take this center cap off, use a 22mm socket, and just carefully loosen these up. Take the lug nuts off, use the same 22mm socket. Remove the wheel. Take these two bolts off on the back here, use a 18mm socket. I'm just going to loosen this top one up. There's not a lot of room with the leaf spring there. Loosen this one up. And this top bolt, actually, you can't get out because of the leaf spring, but you can loosen it up. And then we'll take the whole bracket off. Use an 18mm socket and loosen up the caliper bracket bolts. Take those bolts out. Just take a straight blade screwdriver or pry bar and just compress the caliper a little bit. Just make it easier to remove. Just pry in between the rotor and the caliper. And you can pry the caliper out and slide it off. Take this bolt out. And slide the bracket off the caliper. Take a brake caliper hanger and just hang this from somewhere so the brake hose doesn't have too much tension on it. Hang it up there. Now remove the rotor. If it's stuck on there, you can take a hammer and hit in these locations. Just be careful, don't hit the studs. You can take two screwdrivers and just work the rotor back and forth a little bit. Sometimes that helps. There you go. Take these bolts out, use a 19mm socket. You might want to have a drain bucket underneath here. Some fluid, rear differential fluid might come out when you take this off. Just grab the axle, a little bit of fluid. If it's stuck on there, just give it a little tap with a hammer. And just slide it out. Take a pick and slide it underneath this ring. This is what holds the pin from falling out, so save that. Pull this pin out. You could use a magnet or a pick. And just take that out, set that aside. To take this off, you should be able to just take a screwdriver and loosen this up. You don't really need a socket to take it off. And slide that out. Then just grab the hub assembly and just try to work it out. You might need a pry bar to pry it out a little. The seal on the inside gets stuck. And I'll just use a pry bar just gently. Pry against the parking brake shoes. There we go. And slide it out. And the bearing came off. So that's going to go in there. To take these clips off, you can use a trim tool and a screwdriver. Just push down on the back side And then just try to pry this out. Just be careful, you might want to have safety glasses on in case it springs out. Do the same on this side. Now if you can, just take a pry bar, just try to pry the adjuster out. Just like that. Now take some needle nose pliers and just grab the spring. They have special spring tools you could use as well. And take the spring out, just like that. You can take the pin out so you don't lose it. These brakes are a little bit frozen together. Normally these come off a little easier. Take a pry bar and just carefully pry this out. Be careful, you don't want to get the spring to hit you or anything. Slide that off like that. Should be able to slide the spring out. Just like that. Take the spring off. And like I said, these are frozen, so a little bit rusty. So just work these back and forth. And slide that shoe off as well. And take the other pin out so you don't lose it. If the steel got stuck on here or the inner part of the seal, just take a pry bar, just get behind it. Just be careful not to score anything. Just pry it out, just like that. To make it a little bit easier to disconnect the cable, you can disconnect it right here. This cable is a little bit frozen, so I'm having a hard time doing that. But you would loosen this up and then use some pliers and just slide it out there. That'll make it easier, give you more slack on the cable. We need to remove the parking brake cable. Just take this spring back. If you can use some type of pliers or something, try to pull this back. There's a couple different ways you can do this. You could put a screwdriver down in the spring just to help stabilize that a little bit while you're trying to get this out. So you're pushing, there's a button right there and there's one on the other side as well. Try to push those buttons down as you try to work the spring, work the cable out. And try to just slide it out. There is a slot, so the cable can come out the slot. Just like that. You can take the cable off this end. Just like that. Take this bolt out right here, use a 13mm socket. And that bracket is loose, just leave that there. If you have to support it, just put a bungee cord around the leaf spring and just support the brake line. There's 4 nuts on the back side of here. Use a 15/16 wrench or a socket. There's not much room here for a socket though, and they're pretty tight. So take those out. Now those are all loose. Once you loosen them up a couple threads, they come off pretty easily. Use some rust penetrant, that'll help. Now take a punch and in the center of the stud, just tap it forward. There we go. And slide it up. Now take a socket that fits over the stud. I'm just going to take a couple, line this up. Then take a punch and just punch them through. Do the same on the other ones. Now this piece will slide right out. And take the shield right off. This one's pretty rusty. And just separate that. Take this new plate, and we have these rubber stoppers or grommets. This one goes right here. And this one's going to go right here. And the parking brake lever is going to go through it. Make sure that gets lined up the correct way. And slide this in position. If you have a lot of rust buildup, you want to clean this up with a wire brush or a die grinder. And take the studs, get the studs lined up. And we'll take the sockets again underneath. And hammer these in. Now slide this in position. And put the nuts on. Now tighten these down. If you have the ability to get a torque wrench on there, torque those to 100 foot-pounds. It's just a little bit hard to fit it in there. And put this bracket and the bolt back on and snug it down. And slide this out. Just attach this on here. Slide the spring in between there and slide the cable in position and lock it down. At this point, if you disconnected the cable on the other side of the truck, attach that cable. Put the pins back in. It'd be a good idea to get new hardware, but if you have to reuse the old one, then do that. Now put the springs on the shoes. The back side of the springs should look like this. Takes a little bit of practice to try to get these on properly. Then slide the bottom of this shoe in first. Get that lined up. And kind of fold the other one over. And carefully do this. Don't get your fingers in the way. Line that pin up. And carefully put this clip on. Use your trim tool. So it might take a little bit to get that on as well. Same on the other side. Now you can install the adjuster, or you can install the spring and then try to spread it apart. Put the adjuster in. Either way will work. So put the adjuster in first, then the spring. These are hose pliers, they work pretty well. And slide that in position. Make sure it locks in place, that's good. Take the seal. If the old seal got stuck in the hub, you want to take that out. Just use a pry bar and pry it up. Just be careful not to score the sides. Take the new seal. And there's a special seal installer that you can use to install this, or just use a block of wood. Make sure it's all the way down. It looks good. Make sure the race of the seal isn't on here. And there's a special lubricant you can use to put on this. If you don't have the special, just use the best you can. Now install the hub. Take the hub nut and gently thread it on. And tighten this down. There's a special socket that looks similar to this. It may not have that centerpiece in it. And you want to tighten this to 52 foot-pounds. As you torque this, you want to be spinning the hub in this direction. So you're tightening this way, spinning this way. 52 foot-pounds. After you torque it, you want to loosen it up so that it's just spinning like that. And then take the tool and by hand, just tighten it up till it's hand tight. Not too tight, just snug. It's supposed to be 0 torque. And then make sure that lines up. So if you wanted to just loosen this just slightly, just so this key will line up. Take the key, put the key in. Take the retainer clip. Make sure that gets installed. That's good. Take the gasket off the axle. You can use a scraper or a razor blade. Scrape that off. Make sure this looks nice and clean. And just clean this up a little bit. Use some brake parts cleaner. Just make sure none of the old gasket is on there. And same with the hub surface. Take the new gasket and slide it over. And slide the axle in. And then pry up on the axle a little bit. You gotta try to get it lined up with the gear. There we go. And just spin this to line the holes up. Get the bolts started. Take a pry bar, put it between the studs to prevent the hub from spinning, and torque these bolts to 115 foot-pounds. I'm just going to cross torque them so it tightens it down evenly. Double check. You want to clean up the hub surface a little bit. You can use a grinder, just be careful, don't take too much material off, or a wire brush, and just take some of the rust off. This one's not too bad. Take the rotor, put it on backwards first. Take some brake parts cleaner. Just clean the backside, use a rag and just wipe it. And then flip it around. If you have to adjust the parking brake shoes, you can adjust them right there. The adjuster's there, and there's a little door on the backside. You can remove that, use a screwdriver, and just slide it on. Take some brake parts cleaner and just clean this side as well, and wipe it off. Take the brake caliper hanger off. You want to compress these pistons. Use a piston caliper compressor tool. Just go nice and slow. As you compress the pistons, the brake fluid's going to go through the lines back up into the master cylinder reservoir. So just go nice and slow. Now you can take the bracket and line it up. Take the caliper pins, just spray them down with a little brake parts cleaner and clean them off. If they're severely rusted or corroded, you're going to want to clean out the holes for the brake caliper bracket. Spray some brake cleaner in there and clean those down. Take some brake caliper grease, grease up the pin, and then get these started. And do the same on the other one. We'll just get these finger tight, and then we're going to torque them once the whole caliper is attached to the knuckle. Now you can slide this back in position. Make sure you spread the brake pads over the rotor, and take the bolts, get those started. You can put some thread locking compound on the bolts. Tighten these caliper bracket bolts to 148 foot-pounds. Do the same on the top one. Then tighten the caliper bolts to 80 foot-pounds. And this one's going to be kind of hard to get to, so do the best you can with that one. If you lost a lot of fluid when you were taking that axle hub off, you're going to want to top off the rear differential. Take this fill plug out, top off with the correct fluid, and put the plug back in. It should be good to go. Put the wheel back on. Put the lug nuts on. Torque these lug nuts to 140 foot-pounds in a cross pattern to tighten the wheel down evenly. Don't do that. And just go around again, double check.